what Rome is all about, right? Which is to help
Yeah.
create knowledge and share knowledge.
Hey everyone, welcome to my second consulting call video. This is where I share my lessons with others in the domains that I'm really passionate about. If you'd like to schedule a call with me, click the link in the description below. In this video, David Mehlman and I talk about various Roam extensions that would help really empower his workflows. I hope you find the conversation helpful and enjoy. Thanks for reaching out and for expressing interest in learning more about what we could do to build on top of Roam. And so first, I guess I wanted to get a sense for what it is in general that you wanted to learn. It seemed like there was blurry boundary between knowing how Rome was built and knowing what's possible from your end as either JavaScript extension or yeah. So I guess I just want to know more about how deep you're interested in learning about what's possible to be built.
First of all, thanks for being open to doing this and answering my questions and everything. I think for me, as someone who is non-technical and has no technical background, Rome is incredibly powerful, and power comes from your knowledge of having some technical knowledge and your ability to understand databases and references and your ability to, whether it's JavaScript or CSS and customizing things. And so for people who don't have that background, it can be obviously not as powerful, but also be significantly intimidating. And it is not a super polished sort of from a UI perspective. It is very bare bones. And I understand that they're focusing on speed and stuff like that. So, what I'm interested in is, I think that the CSS and the JavaScript is really interesting, and it is how things look and things that you can do is that you can add on your own features and shortcuts and stuff is really interesting. I'm also to a certain extent interested in sort of the database sort of side of things and how it works, quote unquote, sort of under the hood, although I understand that you don't have to, know all of that stuff in order to do the JavaScript. I think in the short term, what I'm most interested in is learning how to add things on top of the Rome infrastructure that allow me to optimize and maximize the speed of how I use the program. So whether it's things that I've sent you, can I jump to the sidebar, or can I make a different page my home page instead of it having to be daily notes, or can I query on full pages rather than blocks, or stuff like that. It's sort of how my personal UX is, or what that's like, and how can I sort of customize the program to my specific use cases, I think is a fair way to say it.
Cool. Yeah, so I guess the inherent interest is that last line that you just said, which is how can you get customized Rome as close as possible to your personal use cases?
Yeah.
And there is an interest in the JS CSS side of things, and there's an interest in the database side of things, but those interests only go as far as it will facilitate you customizing Rome to be as close to your personal experience as possible.
I think that's fair. I don't really necessarily. I think from an intellectual standpoint, I think there's if I had all the time in the world, to learn how to think about other features and functionality that could work for Rome that don't exist today. Yeah, that's an interesting thought exercise. But to the extent that of staying in the realm of possibility and what's possible given time and knowledge constraints, yes, I think the clearest way to say it is trying to figure out how to customize or optimize or mutate the current version of Rome so that it best fits in how I use it.
Dope. And then, okay, cool. So before we get into some of the use cases that you outlined, are there any general questions that you have before diving into the use cases, or should we just dive in?
No, I think we can dive in. I've added some CSS that I've, like I said to you earlier, it's amazing to me that people are so generous with their time and things that they've built and sharing everything and having this sort of open community. So I'm very slowly learning just by, pasting in the CSS and basically sort of deleting things and seeing what happens on the front end when you change stuff. And I think that's sort of a side thing for me, but I think we can jump right into some of the features. That would be great.
Cool. Cool. Okay, cool. So I'm going to assume that you can see my screen. And
Yep.
these are the bullets here that I gathered from your tweet. And as we go along, if you want me to like add more to the bottom of this, we can.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so the first one we talked about was adding more dates than today, tomorrow, and yesterday with slash command. So basically you have, right, we have these and this. I guess I want to know first, like what sort of slash commands do you envision and or think of, or fantasize about?
So I think when it comes to dates, I mean, I guess you can just do a double brackets, right? And then add whatever date you want, right? You could just say, January 15th, 2022, and that would work. I think what for it seems small to people who write, I think in who work in this kind of language, but like one of the hardest things for me with Rome is not formatting things exactly the same way or having sort of a free text option. Because if I write January 15, 2021 instead of January 15th, 2021,
Yeah.
it's going to create a separate page, or it's not going to show up in my daily notes that way. So like I work in the finance world. So I spend most of my career in Excel. So like it's the difference between having, free text and having sort of constraints on formats that are acceptable, so to speak, right? So
Right.
like, or just put like 1/1/21 and knowing that that is what I'm talking about, something like that. This is, I think, more of it would be a nice feature. I don't think it's so hard for me to remember that I have to put the TH or the ST after the number or something like that. But it's more around constraining what I'm able to enter so I don't create a page that is not sort of congruous with all the other formatting that sort of use case uses.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So because like instead of having to memorize September 9th, 2020, you really like the tomorrow slash command because first it like auto populates there right
Yeah.
away and then it does like the formatting for you.
Yeah, and the
Um,
date picker just seems like really clumsy to me, right? Like
like
I'm
this
trying.
guy.
Yeah, I'm trying more and more to like not use the mouse, and like I'm trying to learn from the
Yeah.
Rome
Yeah.
cult and like these guys who were like, I remember when you were first year banker and everyone was like, dude, like they used to like sort of haze the young kids and they'd steal their mouse and like you have to learn how to use Excel without your mouse and all of that stuff. So I'm trying to have the fastest be able to use it as quickly as possible, but like the date picker seems clumsy to me, and you have to like click to the next month and so on and so forth. So if there was some way to like hash like forward slash and then just put in 1121 or something like that, and it would convert it to the right format of a date or something like that. I don't know
Yeah. Yeah.
obviously how it would work.
Right. Like one thing we would be able to build is like what I wrote down there is like a way to autofocus. So like right now you can still use the keyboard to like
Yep,
navigate, but I can't like select specific dates with my keyboard.
exactly.
So that would be useful. Another thing is, have you heard about Room 42?
Yes.
They have a feature here where I can say like Friday and then do Alt Shift D, and it'll like replace
Oh,
it
interesting.
replace it with September 11th, 2020.
That's
Uh,
really cool. I hadn't seen that one.
yeah, yeah, and it's like there's a lot of natural language processing that they support. So I can even do next Friday, and it'll do September 18th, 2020 when I do Alt Shift D. But then there's also, I guess, that like to facilitate the same thing, you almost asking for a way to do like slash like Friday and then hit enter and it'll like replace it with September 11th, 2020, or if I can do like next Friday and replace that. So both of those should be very possible. When I created the Google Calendar integration, I actually started with using a slash command by doing it like this
Interesting.
and then hitting enter. And then I pivoted away from that into using a button, which means we should be able to do the same thing that Rome 40, like the same commands that Rome 42 is doing, and like add them to the slash command.
Yeah, or even like have it support different, because like Friday and next Friday is cool, but like does it work for 3 Fridays from now? And does at some point you're typing more than the date picker, right? Like if I'm like
Yeah.
14 Fridays from next Friday, like so like even if you could have support that it could recognize, like almost, I always refer back to Excel, sorry, like that it could recognize that 9/11/20 is a date and convert that into the appropriate format, meaning September 20th, comma 2020. That to me would be like the sickest thing, right? Like that you don't have to conform to
Ooh.
their date.
And so yeah, Rome 42 supports that too. So you can do
Okay.
12/14/2020. Oh wait, does 40/40 work? 40/40 works.
Okay. So
And
I hadn't seen that. Okay.
but
So
like
then,
yeah, and like also yeah, 20, yeah. So Rome 42 has like a natural language
okay.
processing feature where yeah, again, you like type out the date and a bunch of different NLP type of ways, and then you just hit Alt Shift
D. Yeah. Sick.
D, and then it will replace it. So while we could do this, it seems like for now, Rome 42 is actually like
Yeah.
facilitating this use case pretty well.
Yeah. That's awesome.
A side feature that this reminds me of is like the date picker just being like more keyboard accessible.
I
And I
think
think
that's right. Because you
that
can just scroll through the months and it would be nice to be able to actually select the date.
right, because sometimes I'm thinking like I want to set this for like 3 Fridays from now, and I don't know what that date is, and so that I
Yep.
find that those are use cases where I use the date picker. And
Yep.
what's frustrating is that I can't like hit like up and down, like scrolls the year, and the left and right scrolls the month.
Yeah.
It should be a way to like move this square, and so
Yep.
that's an interesting feature that I think I might add to my backlog. One down. Recurring events. Yeah. So what's your like standard use case for something like this?
Yeah, I think the Delta may have taken care of this one now. They just released last weekend or whatever it was. But I think for me, like, there are certain things as it relates to work that I just have to do every week or every month, whether it's like, just from it's more, I think it's like a really basic function for Rome. And I don't think it's obviously the intended use case for Rome, but I think, to use the sort of overused phrase of, with great power comes great responsibility. Like if you're trying to be everything to someone, you have to be everything, even if you think it's like sort of beneath you. And I think that like I have a lot of stuff like monthly reports for investors and stuff like that. And it would be nice if those could go into my daily notes on those days so that the 31st or the 1st of every month, I would just know, okay, when I sign on in the morning and I look at what I have to do, or it's like, because again, like if you're trying, I mean, for your extension, right? If I'm importing my calendar and I see it, but if you're trying as Rome to be everything to people and have like their total life basically managed in there, I think it would be nice to be able to set up an event and have it recur every X amount of time. But like I said, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure Delta may have
So I'm
gone a
actually
long
I'm
way with it.
actually unfamiliar with Delta. What does Delta do?
So Delta, this is scary if I'm going to try to explain it to you. They
It's a learning
released.
opportunity between the two of us.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, and as I was talking about before, like it's amazing to me that this kind of things exist. So Delta is a new feature that they released over the weekend, and basically what it does is it allows you to move things into the future. So if you're doing something, so if you type like call David, right? And you hit call David and you hit Alt Shift Enter. So that create. I'm sorry, if you just hit Alt Enter the first, let's do that one. So that creates that little star there, and if you click that star, it will move that block to tomorrow's notes.
Got it.
So like it's basically like punting it into the future. So I didn't finish this today, I want to punt it into the future, right? So if you do that, and then there's this, then so that's like the most basic feature, and then there's this sort of spaced repetition part where there's this 1+2, where if you click that up arrow already in the future, do you want to push it further, and you hit OK. So I don't know what happened there. Try the second line where it says call David still. Yeah. And click that arrow, click out of it and click the arrow. Can you do that? Yeah. So now if you go to September 12th, it will be there as well. So it's sort of like spaced repetition where you can, and I don't know exactly how this algorithm works in terms of like, it's like 2+1. I think it's 2 days from now, and then every other day after that, or something like that. I haven't gotten that far with like sort of the nomenclature of how writing the code works or
Yeah,
writing the
yeah.
line items. And then there's also, if you do shift alt return, it brings the children with it as well, as
Got it.
opposed to
Got
just
it.
bringing the top block. So it's sort of this dual function of, punting things into the future that you haven't finished, but also you can create a space repetition, which I guess is basically some version of a recurring event. I would check out Cortex Futura has a really good like quick little primer on it that he walks through that probably explains it a lot better than I did.
Cool. Interesting. Yeah. So, okay. So it seems like maybe Delta may have like solved this use case. I
Yeah,
will say that the user experience here
not great.
is a bit confusing. What would the ideal user experience look like?
I think the ideal user experience, I mean, I guess for me, before I saw Delta would sort of be like, and this is a perfect example, actually. I'm happy that you asked that because this is a perfect example when you asked me before, like, about like, are you interested in like the database side or like the JS, CSS side? And I said, I don't really know because I'm not too sure where the line of delineation is. But like, to me, it would be interesting to be able to make an event and then like create some sort of, I don't know whether it's like a pop-up or something where you could put under it, maybe you nest it and it's an attribute where it's like how often you want to repeat it, like sort of like the frequency or whatever. And yeah, like repeat as an attribute every Friday or the third Friday of every month or whatever it may be, and it automatically throws it into your daily notes on that day, something like that.
Yeah. So, okay, I think we might be able to do this with Chrome JS extension. Yeah, with JavaScript extensions. So one thing to note here about like JS, CSS versus DB. Right now, there's no way to query the backend directly. There's no like API for that, and so in terms of like how the DB is structured, it's mostly like you can only really speculate how like they're like migrating from one DB to another, but you can only really speculate like how they organize all their data.
Hmm.
And like really the only way to interact with the back end is to like automate things that users do through the front end, which is why
Okay.
there's so much momentum behind like the JS CSS side of things, because we from here you can like manipulate like elements, and you can manipulate text, and you can
Hmm.
like query stuff. They actually released a variable called window.rome alpha API, and this basically allows you to query data from the front end from like different pages that you're not on. So like with Chrome Alpha API, I can like query, all the like what nodes I have in my Roam network, all the different pages and stuff. So you can imagine on a given daily note page, right? I could query, if I open my daily notes for like September 9th, I could create a Roam extension that basically queries for all these repeat variables and figure out which one of these tasks falls on my date given,
Yeah.
based on like whatever the nomenclature we use here.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I think that sort of goes to the last bullet on this list, which is the ability to query across more than one block, right? Because that to me is probably the largest shortcoming, like for my workflow with Roam, is that you can only query within a given block. And I think this is maybe how one of our conversations started with one of the questions which was like, I have metadata on all media that I consume. So whether it's an article, a book, a podcast, a video, an interview, whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
if I want to search for unread books, like it's sort of like I think about it as in Excel, it's like if and book equal me sorry type equals book and status equals unread, but because they're different blocks, it won't query across both of them. And then there are all these people who say, they do the soft line breaks, so it's all one block, but then other people are saying, but then it's not attributes, and the attribute power is going to get so much stronger in the future, so you're sort of being short-sighted by doing that. And then there's a third faction of people that say they create type, status, all that stuff, and then below that they create one block that has all of them. So it's like taking from each of the ones above it. So it'll say like type, book, status, unread, and then some other metadata. And then the bottom one will be book, unread, et cetera, et cetera. It'll be all of them in one block.
Yeah,
So you can
yeah.
query that
It's
block. And
yeah,
to that point, that may be an interesting workaround. But from again, from like Excel, it should sort of be like, can I query or can I like link to what those say above it? So like if you make this attribute exactly, you have to do each one, but could you have that if you could automate it? Well, then that would might be interesting, right? So it just like the last block is like total or something like that, or all or whatever, and it pulled what the hashtags you had used from the type and the status. But the fact that you have to go and type each one and then type them again sort
yeah.
of makes it cumbersome.
Yeah, well, it makes it such that the like this is almost like useless to do right now.
Yeah, because you can't query across more than one. So it's like, what's the point, you
Right,
know?
right. Yeah, and I had this like personal like redesign recently where I did this, ran into the query trouble and then ended up just doing this and got rid of
Yeah.
this format.
But then
But
everyone says that the attributes of the type and the status will be super powerful in the future. And then
yeah,
if you think about your ever growing, graph, do you want to go back and have to change all of it in a year or whatever?
yeah, my philosophy on those points are that I don't like to. I've learned to stop trying to build for the future,
Yeah.
and just build based on what I have available to me now because I've already lost a ton of time building for features that have never been built in my young engineering career. And then the second part of that is that just because they like release something in a new way of doing things doesn't mean you necessarily need to go back and change all the
Yeah.
things that have been done. If you think about like the first time you started using Rome, you didn't go back to like everything that you consumed up to that point to then integrate into Rome, right?
Right.
That'd be insane.
That's what some other very smart people that I've harassed on Twitter have said the same thing. Like, don't worry about the future, build for today and learn and learn to adapt to it. What would be interesting to me, and maybe this is the solution, or maybe this is the answer, is again to use Excel. Like if I had a column in Excel that said status and a column in, if A1 was status and A2 was type, and then B1 was read and B2 was type, I'm sorry, B1 was read and B2 was book or whatever. I could make B3 equals A1, I'm sorry, equals B1 and B2. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So you're trying to get around the query
I'm
problem,
trying to
but
automate that process of saying, like, you can say, like, even you can make it more complicated, right? And say, like, find the colon after the attribute and give me the next 25 characters after that, or whatever it may be, right? So, exactly.
you want something like this.
Exactly. But I want to be able to make that an attribute like all or query block or whatever, and have it automatically pull the ones above it. Like that would be awesome, because then you don't have to, you sort of get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, yeah. So there are definitely ways to go about this, but I think more going towards the end goal, right? The end goal is that like you want to have a block that sort of queries based on this information.
Hmm.
And I think because they have like the window, because of this API that they provided for us, we should be able to like query all pages and look for the ones that actually go across that fulfill this requirement and
Okay.
sort of like paste it into a block. So if I like I can imagine doing a button that says like query books complete, right? And then I hit this button and then under here it'll populate like all of the results for that.
That would
Um,
be incredible, right? And what I got stuck on was the and in the queries, because I was thinking that each one of the queries was finding something that was each one of the queries was a criteria, like in Excel, like if this equals this, then, where it's the and is just, you're just literally searching for like multiple hashtags, right? Like you're just looking for any block that has both of those things, not that one status is this and another status and then a type is that.
Whoa, that's weird.
Yeah, so like I can imagine like an API that looks like this.
Type books that, yes, exactly.
Right, and this will, I mean, it's like not very extensible, but it'll do, I think, a large amount of cases that people are looking for when they're doing this, and then like you hit this button and it'll populate here, and so you'll have to like, it won't be automatic because we don't have a way to have that auto syncing yet, but it will at the very least, like anytime you look at this page, you could just like, get updated for it, and it'll like clear and
You could also create a queries page that have your most common of those buttons. Like I always am looking for books that are like me personally, I'm always looking for articles that are unread, right? Because I'm trying to forever keep up with my reading list.
yeah.
And so like, or like I'm always looking for videos that are watched or whatever it may be, or on a specific subject, and keywords could be in addition to type or status. Like I'm doing research on nutrition, so I'm always looking for books on nutrition or articles that are read that were nutrition or whatever it may be. And you could have a page that just had a list of a bunch of common queries for you, and then you could always refer back to that.
Yeah. Or even you could even and if you have too many queries, so like one thing I do is I have my queries separated by like type. So like under blog post, I only have like the blog post related queries, like the ones
Interesting.
that I have in progress, the ones that are complete, the ones that are interested.
Cool.
For like my Rome.js extensions, I have the same sort of format here where it's like I have the ones that are in progress, the ones that I'm interested in, the ones that I'm completed, and the ones that I archived.
And so you put all three of those things, like Rome.js extension, archived, and personal project, all on one line there. You're not doing like multiple blocks of metadata.
Right. Yeah. And I started off with multiple blocks of metadata, realized that it won't facilitate my use case, and then just
got it.
Just
okay, cool.
Throwing them on a line. And
cool.
I'm just gonna keep doing this until they provide a better way of doing it. And again, I don't think I'll like feel compelled to like have to go back to all my previous pages and fix it, right? It's just like a new like it's almost like I'm starting with a new tool that I'm like 99% familiar with, and just like from that point going forward, going to use the new workflow.
Right, because I guess your old workflow will still work even if you can query across multiple things, right?
Right. I mean,
it's not one
provided that they don't like get rid of it or something.
Sure. Okay, that's cool.
Cool. So I have so and this one too, it's like for repeat every week, you can like have we can have like a button here. I've found the button pattern to be pretty favorable, or I'm starting to like the button pattern because it allows the user to like control when it happens.
Yep.
So like on a daily notes page, you can just have like important recurring events, and it'll query all these things that are like this and find the ones that are relevant and import them to here. And until like
awesome.
And until Rome has a way to like build that in natively, I'm afraid we'll have to like do the button approach, since like they don't have like a way to like auto sync things like customly.
Yeah, for sure.
The way that like block references do. Cool. Navigation and desktop app. This I feel like should be like very, very easy.
So I found a guy that I'm always coming up with new ones, but I'm always trying to knock them down too, who has a JS breadcrumbs thing, which is works pretty well. Like I guess the biggest one for me was really just like, even it sounds so simple and silly, but like back, like when you're in the desktop app, there's no like, it's not like you're on a website. There's no back. So like, what I do as a sort of novice user a lot is click into something when I don't mean to. So like, or I like mean to open it in the sidebar and I open it in the main thing, and I'm like, oh man, like so annoying. Like I have to find the page again. Yeah, you can just go up into search and do it. But if there were a way to just like go back one without having to, like when you're not in the web app, that would be nice. Like your mouse like doesn't, like trackpad, like 3-finger swipe to the left on Mac like doesn't work on this. The breadcrumbs is a cool tool, but like it would be cool. It's like there's so much muscle memory around like, I clicked on the wrong thing on a web page, like let me just swipe back and go backwards.
Yeah, so Rogue 42 like added a button up here for like this date picker, and so I imagine it'd be similarly easy to put another button either up here or up here, and then just like keep a track of the history. Has to be either recorded, or you can or the extension itself could start recording history, and then it'll just add the button into the CSS, and then you can click it, and it's just like a URL replace, or just jumping to the page itself.
That'd be sick.
I've never really used a desktop app, but as far as I know of how React Native works, it's basically the same thing as the web app, but just with instead of a Chrome wrapper, it's
I think it is
Electron
just a wrapper, because all of my extension things are still up there, and you can refresh, and I think it's just they put a wrapper on it, which I guess begs the question of why am I not just using the web app? But it is a frustrating feature there.
Cool. So for this one, what you're saying is that when you see link.com, right, you want to be able to click the block here and it not expand into this.
Yeah, because that's exactly right. And when I'm importing articles that have links in them, and you're trying to either copy and paste or highlight because you're doing sort of Zettelkasten or whatever, every time the most annoying part is that when you click into it to highlight something or copy something, a lot of these links are super long, because the URL is really long, because there's all the source code and references and all of that stuff, trackers on there, that it changes the length of the paragraph. So in this example, yeah, it's whatever, it's just 4 letters, it's not that big of a deal. But if you have these lengthy URLs in there, it totally changes the length of your paragraph. And then you have to find where you are again. And there are times when it literally interrupts your flow of reading, because you have to go in and sort of recenter yourself, basically.
Have you ever heard of this term, WYSIWYG? What you see is what you get.
No.
Yeah. So the reason this happens is that when you edit a block, the text itself is rendered as Markdown, which is a very common rendering format for for a lot of researchers, engineers, etc. And so I actually find a lot of value in the default mode being Markdown, and for this by default being Markdown. But I can see a use case with what you're saying, where you actually want to click into the block in WYSIWYG mode, where maybe if you shift click the block, then it preserves it, turns it into a text area that instead of rendering it Markdown mode regular click does, you can do a shift click and it'll render it still in WYSIWYG mode, and then the URL will be
it's
preserved.
almost plain text or something, right? It doesn't have that Markdown, because I see what you're saying. There's definitely a value there to be able to edit or whatever, but for me, there's definitely value. And like I said, and I can, I'm sure you can figure out what I'm talking about, but there are countless examples of these articles that have 200 character URLs, right? And it's the thing takes up 3 lines in the paragraph, and then I don't even know where I am. I see what you're saying. It's almost converting to plain text or something like that. And I don't even know if it's a shift click, or if it's you turn it on and off. You're okay, I'm in a certain mode, I'm in research mode, I'm not in editing mode, so I want to turn that sort of off.
It's sort of how you can do control enter to do the to-dos.
Exactly.
Maybe if there was an alt enter, and that just alt enter alternates between Markdown and WYSIWYG mode.
Yeah, that'd be sick. Because there'll be 2 hours, right? It's not necessarily just within one block. It depends sort of what part of my day I'm in, or what workflow I'm in. If I'm literally researching and reading articles and stuff, I have no need for Markdown probably at that. Later in the day, I might want Markdown.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I think that's the way to tackle this is being able to edit a block in either of these formats. Cool.
Awesome.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about editing in a different way, but that's pretty cool.
It's so interesting to me, these conversations, sometimes with you or other people, I'm what about this? And these are people who have spent their lives as engineers, and they're I never would have thought to do something like that. And it just sort of, I think, sometimes shows you the value of the layman's user experience.
Well, because the thing is all of our experiences are very unique to our specific domains, right? And so I lack the context of all the other 99% of domains of people who live their lives.
For sure. So, also, you have a forced that you're gonna be in Markdown, so your brain subconsciously is prepared for that. Whereas this is really my first experience with Markdown. I'm what is going on here? Why does this is so annoying? I'm not prepared. My expectation is not that I'm gonna read a book and like click on something and one link that's 4 letters is going to turn into 200 character.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, so it's like it wasn't like where for you it wasn't expected to be like where for me it was like sort of like a cool thing to see. For you it was like super unexpected behavior, and you're like, what the hell? I just want to like edit this as if it was like Microsoft Word.
Yeah, or like, like Kindle, like I
Yeah.
just want to read this and copy the line. I don't need to see like the root or whatever it is.
Very cool. Okay, cool. I want to try to get through these last two.
Yeah, sure.
Change the order of blocks in sidebar with dragging. Can't this
I just wish
happen?
you could. I struggle with this. I don't. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. But I mean, like you can, like how you can obviously just drag like blocks. Like I can't do it. Maybe it's the desktop app you can't do it in, and you can do it in the web app. But like you
Yeah.
can move those blocks around, right?
Yeah. This is a thing that happens.
Okay, so no, what I'm saying is if you minimize that September 9th and you open something else in the sidebar.
Oh, like between different blocks?
Yeah.
I think you can do that too. So I have September 9th, September 10th. I can like take call David and move it here.
No, what I'm saying is I want to move September 9th to on top of September 10th. It just does it on recency. It's just the latest one that you clicked. It's not, you can't move them around. Like, because when I'm writing, I'm like, okay, I want to reference this. And then I click onto a new thing to open in the sidebar. I'm like, no, but that's not the most important one for me. And because I want it basically in like publishing terms, like above the fold, so to speak, like I want to always see that one. So like this is order is September 10th, then September 9th. I want to be able to move it similarly the way that you can with blocks and move September 10th above that.
Yeah, it's like the only way to do it is to like X one out and then
X one out and then go back and yeah, exactly, and make it just the most recent one. So I don't know if it's possible.
This is this is very possible.
Okay.
As most things are.
It's sort of another thing of working with a layman, right? It's like, I don't even know whether these things, like when I talk to engineers, sometimes they're like, dude, that's the easiest thing in the world. And I'm like, oh, I thought it would be so hard. Or I'm like, oh, this should be really easy. And they're like, that's not physically possible. Like,
well, so actually there's one sort of caveat that might be difficult, which is I don't know if Rome uses a web framework called React to like display everything, and React sort of has its like own like internal state on the browser that we as engineers we can't tap into, and that's sort of a good thing. Like it's like a good security feature of React that like web scrapers or robots or anything can't from the outside like tap into that state. What that means is that like the Rome team themselves has to provide APIs like the window.Rome alpha API in order to change any state within the app to like do something that we would like. So I don't know if this ordering, how much this ordering is state that's managed by React. If it is managed by React, it would be very hard to change, and the only way we would be able to do it is sort of the same thing where we're like just automating user behavior. Like we would like the way to actually do it would be like to automate the like click and then shift click here.
Okay, interesting.
So this actually might be a lot harder than I imagined it. I can foresee like one hack around this where we fuck around with the CSS and say that like there might be a way to mess around with the CSS on top of this to like move things around that I wasn't able to figure out in the 1 minute of hacking here. But it would be like a kind of a messy thing without like being able to like tap into like Rome's like internal state of like how they're managing this order.
X out and go to the recency it is then.
Yeah, well, I can look into doing this.
I don't think it's like as like big enough of a pain point for me that it's like,
Right.
This last one, I know we're running up into an hour is, and this is another thing I sort of as a layman, like this could be super dangerous as from a data integrity standpoint, but being able to find or replace, like, for example, I'm working on a new company that we're investing in, and I've been calling it, I'm researching Apple, right? And I'm writing up a bunch of notes, and it's APPLE, some are capitalized, some are lowercase, some start sentence, some don't. Sometimes I write capital AAPL for the ticker. Sometimes it's Apple Computer because I'm pasting in from an article and they refer to it as the corporate name and so on and so forth. The ability to like do something, I don't know whether it's like a just a JS or whatever, where it's like find all the references to, AAPL in capital and turn that into APPL because that's what my page reference is, right? Or change it into an
Yeah.
alias even or something like.
So there is a way to sort of do this right now. Let's say like especially was my word that I wanted to find and replace. You could make that a page, right?
Mm-hmm.
Click into especially, go into all the unlinked references, link all of them, and then do especially. And then I could delete this page.
Wait. What's the capital ESP for?
Oh, it's just
You're
any,
just changing
yeah,
that.
yeah, just changing it, and so then I could delete this page, and now all of my, now I've basically essentially find and replaced everything that said especially into capital ESP actually.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yep.
So
Yep.
there's currently a way to like do this
Oh,
in Chrome.
because you're changing. Okay, because you made them all the same link, and then you change the name of that page, and then
Yep.
deleted it. So you're sort of like doing it like a multi-step process.
Yeah. And because there's no API for inserting data, I actually think this is probably the way to go about it. And if like
Got it.
if I were to imagine a JavaScript extension do this, I would probably just automate these steps.
Automate that process. Interesting. Because the other way that I was thinking about doing it was searching for ESP, like capital Eshley, and then just changing it and merging the two pages. But like that's super tedious also, right? Like you have to think of every time. And then because sometimes they'll all be references, right? So it's like brackets AAPL, brackets Apple, lowercase, brackets Apple, uppercase. And you can just go into each one and just change them all to the same name and it'll merge the pages, obviously.
Yeah.
But that's super time consuming also, like.
Well, it's hard to do. It's hard to like figure that out in an automated way.
Exactly.
Like I think that's something that's gonna almost axiomatically be like a tedious behavior because like where for you might want all those to be linked together. I can imagine for somebody else if they want AAPL and Apple to be separate pages.
For sure.
Where like one
Yeah.
references the company and the other one references the stock ticker or something like that.
Also, there are like, because we have homonyms like in the English language, or like adding an S to a word doesn't necessarily mean the plural, right? Like I was actually some people were chatting about this on Twitter, but it's like force versus forces, right? Like those are not the same. Forces are not the plural of force, right?
Yeah.
Necessarily. It could be. So it's like, I understand that there's like, and they were talking about like Wikipedia does it this way, and it could be hard, but it's definitely sort of just a generic pain point of keeping everything linked to the same thing. And I guess that's the workaround, is just to search, link them all, and then change them to the same thing.
Yeah, and I actually think it's like a pretty decent workaround.
I agree.
It's like only 2 or 3 steps, and it's also like at every point makes you like ensure that this is like the operation you want to do, which sort of sidesteps your like data integrity concern because you can like review all the unlinked references and be like, okay, yeah, this is something I want to do.
Oh, true, for sure. Yeah. Well, this was awesome, man.
Cool. No, thank you for reaching out. These are I think tagged like 4 more ideas just from this call to add to my
I have
backlog.
a bunch, so we can do it again if you ever want to.
Yeah. Do you have any questions about like how maybe like I could help you get started on making some of this? I do have a call at like 11, but
I guess, yeah. And we don't have to answer it now, but like, as you think about these types of questions, like, is it mostly, and again, we don't have to answer it now, you can always email me or whatever. Is it mostly CSS? Is it mostly, JavaScript? And if it's one or the other, how do you think about, other than trial and error, is there something like, is there a great sort of primer or, tutorial, or like, is it just, like I said, with the CSS, like, just hacking around in there in the CSS and figuring out, oh, if I change this, this is what happens. So I'd love to at some point just shoot me a note and what you think is an interesting way to learn, obviously, about this stuff.
have you seen? I just published an article 2 days ago about that addresses some of that. Let me actually just Zoom message
For sure.
you that article. And also, yeah, I would say in summary, it is a lot of trial and error. And it's like a lot of poking around the Rome front end to figure out like, oh, what are these things called? How are they designed? How are they organized? How can I call them? How can I, access them? Right now, in terms of writing, it's mostly just like automating user behavior, which is not ideal. But hopefully they provide an easier way to do that in the future.
Yeah.
Uh,
This looks I just pulled it up. This is looks like a great place to start. So I know you have a Claude 11. I do too. I just again want to thank you for taking the time, not only today but also for dealing with and bearing with all my questions, and helping me learn, and taking the time out of your personal life to write articles like this, and help other people learn. I think it's very much in line with the goal of what Rome is all about, right? Which is to help
yeah.
create knowledge and share knowledge, and for autodidacts and people that want to better themselves and share information that they have with others. So big thanks for all that.
Yeah, no, and thank you. I'm sort of like making my career this sort of thing, not like specifically Rome, but just like more of doing these sorts of conversations, tutorials, blog posts, open source tools. Like this is now like what I consider my job. So
That's awesome.
really enjoy it. Like you reaching out and like providing me feedback like how of like what I can do going forward. So thank you.
That's awesome. Well, let's keep in touch, and the list is ever growing. So let's do it again.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks everyone for watching. To catch up on more of what I'm building, please check out my website at davidvargas.me. If you find that you're getting value out of what I'm creating, I would really appreciate you sending me back some value by becoming a sponsor. Head to the support link in the description below to find out more on how you can do so, and for me to continue doing the work that I do. Thanks again.